Now, the second standout feature of Photoshop are the three primary types of selection tools, and they're all located up here near the top of your toolbar. The selection tools all target the currently selected layer, so always begin by making sure that you have the correct layer selected. In our case, we only have one layer, so we're good to go. Now, the first type of selection tool that we're going to look at are the marquee tools right here, with the rectangular and the elliptical marquee being the two most common that you'll use. You can press M on your keyboard to quickly activate the frontmost marquee tool. I'll begin with the rectangular marquee tool, then click and drag to make a selection. Now, selections appear as a dashed line that is commonly referred to as the marching ants. If you click and drag inside of the marching ants, you can reposition your selection. When you have a selection and you want to change to another tool, like the paintbrush tool, you'll only be able to make changes to the current layer inside of the selected region. If you try and paint outside of the marching ants, nothing will happen, which is good because it means it gives you a boundary for where you're making changes. Okay, let's undo that with Command or Control Z. Now, a really handy trick for making difficult selections sometimes is to use the invert command. So start with any selection and then go up to the select menu and choose inverse, or Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I on your keyboard. Now, this changes the selection from your original selection inside of the marching ants to the area outside of where your initial selection was. Now, when you try to paint inside of the box you initially created, nothing happens. But as soon as you move out into the selected region, you're suddenly able to paint on those pixels. Okay, let's undo that again with Command or Control Z, and let's clear our selection by going back up to the Select menu and choosing Deselect. Now, all of these selection tools can be combined with modifier keys to help you better control your tool. I'll reselect my marquee tool by pressing the M key, then holding down the Shift key while you click and drag your first marquee will constrain your shape to a perfect square or circle, while releasing the Shift key will allow you to create a rectangle or an ellipse depending on which marquee tool that you're using. Once you have a selection, holding down the Shift key on your keyboard will add a small plus sign next to your cursor. And now when you click and drag over your selection and you release, you'll add this new area to your original selection. If you hold down Option or Alt, your cursor will get a small minus sign next to it. And then if you click and drag a new selection and release, you'll subtract the new selection from your original selection. If you hold down Shift and Option or Alt at the same time, your cursor will get a small X next to it. Now when you click and drag a new selection, when you release, you'll get the intersection of those two selections. Okay, let's deselect by pressing Command or Control D, and then let's have a quick look at the other two common types of selection tools so you have a basic idea as to how those work as well. The next group of tools are the lasso tools, and you can call those up by pressing the L key on your keyboard. These let you draw free-form selections. Let's select the magnetic lasso, and then to use it, move near the edge boundary of the item that you want to select, and click and begin dragging around the outside edge, and try and stay close to the edge of the object that you want to select. When you get back to the starting point, your cursor will get a small circle next to it, indicating that you're ready to close the selection. Then release your mouse and you'll have your initial selection. And to use the keyboard commands to add to your selection, move your cursor inside of the marching ants, then hold down the Shift key like we saw before, and notice we get our plus sign. Now drag out over top of the boundary, and then drag out over the edge of where you want to add to your selection. Then cut back inside, go back to your starting point till you get your closing circle, and release. If you need to subtract from a selection, you'll want to start outside of the selected area, holding down Option or Alt to get your minus, and then draw into your selected area and come back and close. Okay, let's deselect again by pressing Command or Control D. Next are what I like to call the wow, these are cool selection tools of the Quick Select and Magic Wand tool. You can summon them with the W key for wow or wand if you prefer. Now, the Quick Select tool has become my go-to selection tool because it generally works so well in so many situations. You want to move your cursor inside of the area that you want to select, and you're simply going to paint in the object that you want to select. Now, if you find that the tool is making too generous of a selection, just use the left square bracket key to reduce the size of your brush and get finer control over the area that you want to paint. If you need to expand your area, then use the right bracket key to increase the size of your brush and paint over the area. I'll reduce the size of my brush a little bit there, and just as before, we can add to our selection by holding down the Shift key and clicking and dragging right up to the edge of where we want to have our selection here. And we've gone ahead and selected too much. So now you can hold down Option or Alt and you'll get the minus, and you can just click inside of that area and brush up to the edge. Clean up a little bit right here. And that's looking pretty good for a rough selection. Spend some time going back and forth with the tools to get a more precise selection. Once you get a selection that you're happy with, it's a good idea to go up to the Select menu and go down to Save Selection. You can then name your selection, I'll call this Glasses, and click OK. Now if anything happens and you lose your selection, I'll press Command or Control D to deselect. You can always get your selection back by going back up to the Select menu and selecting Load Selection. Then click on the Channel drop-down and choose your selection, then click OK. Now, you'll get more practice making selections throughout the rest of this course, and keep in mind that there is no one perfect selection tool for every situation. You'll likely need to try various tools to get the best results. Okay, that's the basics of making selection. Now we'll take this a step further in the next movie and talk about masks.